Welcome to the Growth Boss podcast, where we seek out the secrets to high-performing campaigns from some of the smartest marketers in the world. I'm your host, Jared Smith. Today, I have Nik Ranger with me, and she's going to teach us the SEO secrets behind billion-dollar brands. Nik is a Senior Technical SEO Consultant, a Google WTM Ambassador, and chair of SEO Collective Australia. Nik has a strong passion for technical SEO audits, user intent research, and finding opportunities in highly competitive industries. She's been recognized as one of the top SEO experts by Search Engine Journal and has contributed to several books on SEO. Nik, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks so much, Jared, for having me. I'm really excited to be here on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So very excited to dig into this. Haven't spoken with too many SEOs that have tackled SEO campaigns for billion-dollar brands. So this is a big deal. Let's start off with the mindset. And what is the biggest mindset shift required when transitioning from SEO on like smaller businesses to managing SEO at an enterprise level?
I'd love to be able to disclose who I'm actually going to talk about today, but I'm under strict NDA. So unfortunately, until that expires, I'm not at liberty to disclose my client's name, but just know that they're the largest global B2B e-commerce platform with an annual revenue of 130 billion, of which I manage 14.21 billion. Happily, I can be able to say that we saw a 46% increase year on year. I think the biggest mindset shift when transitioning from SEO to smaller businesses to enterprise level SEO involves shifting from a tactical execution focused approach to more of like a strategic data driven and collaborative approach that considers the entire enterprise ecosystem. Because at the enterprise level, SEO efforts, they can extend across a vastly larger site. And for me, like I look at quite literally millions of pages. So that requires moving away from optimizing, like looking at the individual page in isolation, but having to adopt a more systematic approach that can be applied and scaled across the entire site. So that focus shifts to looking at problems at the template level, looking at style guide, and looking at automated processes and logic to be able to ensure that we're having good SEO practice being implemented and having, as close to efficient as we possibly can. So while quick wins, they still do exist and they are nice, they do sometimes lose their impact to the importance of experiments and testing. Because again, at that scale, you really want to make sure that you have a good understanding of how the site and how search engines are reacting to the site. So enterprise SEO requires a culture of continuous testing and experimentation. We're no stranger to that. A/B testing, different snippet variations, content formats, on-page elements, all those things are really, really essential and has been the linchpin to a lot of our success. So for me, I think like the mindset that's essential has got to be like that ongoing process that requires continuous adaptation and just ongoing improvement all the time. So I think that's really key there.
Yeah, absolutely. And once that shift happens, Nik, how do you align the SEO strategies with broader business goals, especially in some of these very large companies? Most of the time when a small business owner comes to us, they come to us broadly saying, hey, want to rank better, want to grow the business. But when you're working with a billion-dollar brand, I'm sure the goals, the KPIs, I would imagine are a little more specific.
Yeah, I completely agree. And from my experience operating at this scale, aligning an SEO strategy with broader business goals is essential, and it requires a comprehensive, data-driven approach that considers both the technical and marketing aspects of what they're trying to do. So I think this really does involve a lot of thoughtful planning and organization around those deliverables. So I think like a lot of the time that they've reached out to us, it's usually been very much either revenue based, or in one of the cases for this brand that I work with, they want to be able to improve their crawl to render to index rate. And that was one of the things that they identified through an enterprise crawler that they had some issues with. So just knowing that we wanted to be able to have a conversation of like, well, let's identify the right pages. Let's have something realistic to be able to tangibly work towards. So let's have an idea around how the revenue goals, and to be able to expand their market share and to be able to improve their brand awareness, to be able to look at this holistically. So what I really try to do is translate a lot of those goals into SMART, which is an acronym that simply means like what is specific, what is measurable, what is achievable, relevant, and time bound, that is relevant for us and for their SEO team as they're implementing it. Because a lot of the time the development team will have a litany of priorities and we're wanting to communicate best like how this fits into the bottom line and really, speaks to their goals. Another thing that I think is really, really important is understanding, how that then connects to the customer journey with just in the way that like users are finding the site. So like analyzing customer engagement and understanding their journey on a site can really, really highlight where we can be a lot more effective. So like I said, like identifying the key pages, the key types of content that is the most successful is really, really helpful, because the better we can be able to shine light on this, I think that does go back and translate this towards the bottom line. Because ultimately Google uses various signals to be able to assess user engagement and website quality. One of the things that we've looked at is through, I don't know if you remember like the Google API link. Dan Petrovich, who I work with, he's a founder of the agency that I work at. He discovered some sensitive documents that really underpinned a lot of Google systems. And from that, we learned that with Nav Boost, the system that uses clickstream data to be able to identify and reward high quality content, it analyzes user behavior signals, such as click-through rate, dwell time, bounce rates. So pages with highest click-through rate, longer dwell time, and more likely to receive that ranking boost. One of the things that we've been doing as a consistent practice is doing CTR analysis from modeling client first-party data. So taking Search Console data, being able to model that and have a good understanding of expectations along the line of what your expected click-through rate should look like versus what you're actually getting. This is really, really helpful to be able to find anomalies in the data to say like these particular types of pages or queries are rewarding the site with more traffic than normal because they've got a higher than average click-through rate for the position that they're actually logged. So that's where we can be able to look at these things and be able to detect like at scale, like what is happening. How this gets back to, the goals is because a lot of what we can be able to do there is do projections with this data. Because if we've got a model of all of the data and in the way that it's successful or not successful, we can be able to extrapolate and find statistical like areas within this of like, okay, well, these are the pages we know that are earning clicks. And these are the hypotheses that we have as to why. These are the pages that are losing clicks. And again, we have a hypothesis as to why. If we were to just increase just those pages that are earning us clicks, be able to influence the click-through rate for these and just move them up just one position, we can then be able to extrapolate how many clicks that we would reasonably look to expect without doing any work. And when I say without doing any work, having to do any extensive work from a technical sense or from adding new page content. And that's really, really interesting because that allows us to be able to say, all right, well, with the learning that we have, if we do some snippet experiments based on what we see here, then reasonably we can hopefully be able to influence the click-through rate because we're able to like find a more efficient snippet at scale. So that's kind of like one of the first things that we do with a business goal, to communicate the way that it can be able to be extrapolated through sophisticated projection modeling, and then start to like lay the ground for some initial experiments to be able to just get some understanding of like how search engines, how users are interacting with their site based on the experiments that we can be able to see from these anomalies.
Yeah. Love it. And just out of curiosity, like what is the sample size for, you brought up the snippet, tests. I assume you're not testing title tag changes, description tag changes on, a million pages at a time. You're probably just taking a small sampling. Like how big of a sampling do you feel like is necessary for a test like that?
Well, it's funny you say that because a lot of what we deal with this client is in the millions. What we can be able to do is test them on subdomains that have not as high of an ROI to the business, so we can be able to segment off these experiments and see, what influences they will have and how they work, with big caveats of saying like, well, this one is only applicable to your French subdomain, for instance, or this one is only applicable to your German subdomain, your Italian, so on and so forth. So with that, we can be able to do experiments on a smaller scale, but eventually it is the goal that we can be able to learn what is effective and what is working and be able to replicate those results across more higher value types of templates. So a lot of what we will do is look at the template level, because a lot of that will be rule based. So it might say like, and for this particular client, they will use their own sophisticated GPT models to be able to pull certain fields from their PLP pages to be able to generate the title and the description. My job is to look at that logic and assess whether that is working with good clarity, as in, is the title and the description actually accurate to the on-page PDP pages that have been displayed in array for that PLP. And for folks at home, PLP is just it's like a category page. PDP is a product page, just to simplify the language. But I really just want to make sure that there is good accuracy and aligning with the search intent. And one of the most fascinating things that we're working on at the moment is that it's not. So we're using machine learning to be able to go through and do this assessment a lot more closely by using an array of different models, using BERT, which is bidirectional encoder recorder transformation, which is one of Google's own algorithms that it uses to be able to do assessments at the semantic level, to be able to look at this a little bit more carefully and see whether we could be able to refine this and make suggestions to improve this logic. So this is one of the things that we're trying to experiment with at the moment. So a lot of the solutions that we come up with is, yes, we do traditional SEO activities, but we have an additional, data science element to our work that looks at trying to solve complex problems in the most efficient way with, from an SEO's perspective. Like, we're the ones that are informing and building these tools. Dan Petrovich is the one who is building these tools, and I'm there testing and iterating on them based on what we see.
Incredible. I love it. So with SEO playing such a critical role in business success these days, how do you approach measuring ROI when working with executive teams, especially at massive brands like this? They're expecting clear and tangible outcomes.
Yeah, 100%. I think going back to what I was saying around the CTR modeling, a lot of this is meant for top level, because it is a lot more broad in the way that it will speak into their overall goals. When we are a little bit further along, then we have quarterly business reviews that communicate them by their metrics in which we're signed on for. So we will have not necessarily KPIs, but we will have deliverables and expectations to those deliverables. So a lot of our QBR reporting will align with that. So we will have like segmentation where it'll be like, first time users. It will have long time users. So we're able to segment those different audience types. And in the way that we're having pages be monitored for their traffic and for their success. And we will have like additional tools that will work with them to also have their revenue data. So how that draws into the bottom line. Typically, we will split this off by two different types. We'll have their branded traffic and their non-branded traffic. As yes, like branded traffic is traffic that they've already earned, but still this is a lot of activities do require additional brand building. They do require to have like mediated campaigns around that. So that does have a net influence. And when it comes to influencing things on a trust level, that does have a net impact on brand. So we still measure those things just as much as we do for non-branded, because of course non-branded traffic, a lot of that traffic is there to be able to go after users that are not familiar with the brand or have not experienced the brand, or we're wanting to expand into new markets and have greater visibility over new queries. So non-branded growth is exceptionally helpful to be able to determine that. So when it comes to reporting, although I'm communicating this at a very top level, it does get very, very granular. I just wanted to be able to communicate the overall concepts, because when it comes to communicating this at C-level, they don't care too much for detail. They care about the bottom line. They care about their core objectives, their business goals, and how the organic channel and a lot of the additional elements that we do affects that.
Yeah, absolutely. So going beyond immediate ROI, what's your strategy for ensuring that content continues to drive traffic over time?
I'll put this really, really simply, because a lot of and I say this also from someone who has worked on HCU affected clients, so helpful content update clients, publishers that have, had less favorable results that are real businesses. I want to just have some, a broader view of this. I think when it comes to content and when it comes to long-term growth, I see growth pathways in 3 main segments. We can be able to rank higher, we can be able to rank broader, or we can be able to rank better. I think that's a really good way to start to, think of this. Ranking higher would be like influencing the algorithm, having better trust and authority signals, being able to have a better information architecture with the way that the site is laid out. You can be able to rank higher, so go from position 4 to position 3, if you really look at those things and have a consolidated view. Ranking broader, in my view, is being able to affect the crawling and the rendering to index pathway, adding new content to be able to increase the visibility and discovery of pages, and optimizing the on-page content. I think you can be able to rank broader by being able to have new queries that you're able to go after. And ranking better is really looking at the same rank, but influencing this for more clicks. So exactly what I was saying before with the CTR modeling, by looking at what we are currently getting with expected click-through rate versus what we're actually getting, and finding these anomalies. These are the kinds of things that we have found to be able to lay experiments and be able to achieve a lot more clicks, because we're able to see what is been motivating users to click through to certain pages. Influencing the SERP and query intent, so having structured data or being able to optimize on-page elements so that there's more likelihood of rich snippet opportunities, and of course really doing a lot more of that sort of holistic work where we're not just looking at just blue links, we're looking at how to be able to surface across as many platforms. And so that's where, things like Google Discover, that's where things like Google News can be able to come in clutch.
So from a technical perspective, Nik, what are the most common SEO pitfalls that you're encountering in large-scale enterprise environments?
Oh boy, I will have to keep this pretty short because I see a lot of cardinal sins, as you can probably imagine. I think one of the things that I see is one of the most complex and critical is seeing client-side rendered internal links. Internal links are incredibly important because we can be able to control them. Internal links, we can be able to showcase what pages are the most important to search engines. They help users be able to navigate and find deeper content. They add contextual elements to verify certain information or have people be able to click through or be able to find more helpful links from pages. So they can be exceptionally useful. Having client-side rendered internal links, though, can really, really inhibit this because it just it's not able to distribute the link equity efficiently. And it doesn't really signal that importance to other pages. So while that fix would improve the site discoverability and navigation for search engines, I do think that at scale, it is really a complex issue to be able to manage because some of those things will require them to rewrite a lot of the links into the raw HTML. And for some sites, it is so large of a problem that yes, you can be able to do this on the template level, but sometimes this will require, additional conversations around what is the best way to be able to approach the problem that is that large. In the case of my 130 billion per annum client, we're finding that across their homepage, across PLPs, their category pages, their PDPs, across their blog pages, all of their sites, all of those internal links, all those helpful links that guiding search engines and users through to deeper pages, all of those are client-side rendered. Not to mention having disambiguation from linking from the global site to the subdomain or from the subdomain to the global site and having translated pages. It just, from a a user perspective, in their view, it doesn't have an interrupted process. But what the overall effect is, the user is now finding that like, oh, I can see the same content. I can see the content that I clicked through to. It's in the same language that I've clicked through to, but now I'm on a completely different site. So I don't really know if I'm actually transacting in the right region. I don't know whether I'm going to actually get this delivered to me. How does this change like the order that I'm wanting to place? And all these small little decisions that a user is finding with this, it's detracting away from the overall service that the site is actually trying to convey, and will do this, and it has like negative effect. I think the complex thing there is having that experience be translated and shown to C-suite to be able to prove this action at scale. So that's really the art and the science of it. So sometimes, so in that instance, that's where we open up like a lot more analytics tools to be able to explain this from the way that we can be able to see users clicking through to pages, how much time they spend on what that sort of looks like, and actually like map this out for different user journeys from accessing different points of the site in the way that will showcase different results. And again, a lot of the pages will hydrate differently because they have personalization. Anyway, so getting back to it, I think client-side internal links are an exceptionally complex and problem that is quite critical. Another thing that I see is, I think this will be a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to anyone that's listening to this, is having different views for desktop and mobile results. So if there is different content that has been served to users and to to user agents, that can actually create a cloaking risk. So one of the things that we really want to make sure is to be able to ensure that the content, there's a consistency between the user and the bot version of the page. So we can be able to eliminate discrepancies in the on-page content, having internal links, canonical tags, and other SEO elements that really make up the core experience of a page. So having those different inconsistencies can really, really help prevent penalties and avoid like essentially cloaking, which is a serious violation of search engine guidelines. There's a lot of concern around this because I think in the M. era, where they had like, subdomains for mobile versions of the page, and we had, when mobile first indexing was coming into play, I think a lot of the thinking there was, well, let's have the subdomain showcase the mobile version of our pages, and that will satisfy us, and it will make it easier for our development team because everything that is pertinent to the mobile view will be on the subdomain, and everything that is for the desktop view can be on our main TLD, top level domain. Oh boy, there's still a lot of legacy problems with that particular type of implementation, and that's still something that even in 2025, I'm still trying to work through. But what it does is it will have two different views for the mobile and for the desktop view. And a lot of this experience really does need to have a lot of additional signals with that. So I think that, another thing that is really important to note, and something that I see often all the time. Another one I see is content hidden behind tabs. There is a lot of cruel wastage. I think that not crawl wastage, a lot of content that just doesn't get indexed appropriately because it gets lost. With having any content really behind a tab or, an additional click that doesn't necessarily change the URL. So if you're trying to click through and you're seeing like, a completely new page, if you're switching from a different tab and the URL stays exactly the same, what that's actually trying to do is you're trying to rely on JavaScript to fully render it to be considered for index rank for all that content. So if the raw HTML doesn't necessarily include the content for tab A, tab B, tab C, etc. simultaneously, where instead maybe it only has like one tab of content, this can essentially mean that like it has to use JavaScript to be able to fetch and render that new content dynamically rather than just reloading an entirely new page or having a separate page. So this can really result in a poor indexation of the content that is behind tabbed content, unless there's like, like I said, like proper server-side rendering or hydration, like pre-rendering for those pages. So that can be a really, really big issue as well. I think you can sort of like appreciate, I could probably keep going and keep listing things. one of the problems I see really along that crawl to render to indexation pathway is that they're just not addressed. And a lot of this technical SEO foundation, I think, is neglected because a lot of the conversation is so dominated around ranking. And I think that really just takes away from the real potential of a site, because they might, with someone with a mentality of just thinking like, I gotta make the ranking a lot more better for a site, and they don't think about like the crawl to render to the index pathway. It just means that they're trying to just, move the needle on a small subset of pages that have been seen, but may not be the best pages or may not be all of the pages. So they're trying to fix like the pages that are currently successful, and they're just adding more content on to hopefully increase the visibility, not addressing the core problem of having the crawl not be able to find pages.
Yep.
The search engine isn't able to fully render all the elements of the page. So all that hard work, all that content isn't even being considered for the index. So when it finally gets to, the page has been indexed, the content has been indexed, and then people think about the rank. Well, they're only worrying about a small subset of a larger potential opportunity.
Yes, completely. No, that totally makes sense. Have you faced any situations where legacy systems, and again, we're talking about billion-dollar brands that have probably been around for at least a decade, maybe two, they've created barriers to implementing SEO best practices? And if so, how did you work around those limitations?
Oh boy. So I don't know if anyone else has talked about this particular concept, but I'd like to coin this concept of the drooping accordion theory. So when you've got a legacy system, typically there will be a lot of tech debt. When you have such a complex system, an outdated CMS, a rigid site architecture, slow development cycles, and just additional technical debt that really makes it difficult to implement modern SEO recommendations efficiently. A lot of what I've noticed is that instead of maybe fixing some of those legacy elements, they'll just leave it. And there's so much sense to that, because a lot of the time it will be like, oh, it was created by this person way back in 2015, and all of the notes within the code is just do not touch this. Don't touch this because it works. We don't know why it works. We don't know how it works. There's no documentation about anything around it or any of the things that it actually uses to be able to be a lot more efficient in the way that it will talk to other programs or other things around the site. So just don't touch it. So what a lot of developers will do is respect that, but just add additional code on top that tries to just see in the way that the code works, and then just add okay, well, if this is working here, then let's just add this additional code on top of it that just addresses that. So over time, you just get the stacking and stacking and stacking of overlaying code that is trying to fix problems, but is creating this accordion of issues, and it's starting to droop to the point where you have vulnerabilities in the system, you have security issues, and when you're having to update this, it sort of almost makes sense to have to, redo the entire platform. So that can really, really be quite difficult. So with older CMS systems, they often lack inbuilt SEO friendly features such as customizable meta tags, sometimes schema markup support, dynamic rendering for JavaScript heavy pages. When I said slow development processes, many enterprises rely on batch releases instead of real-time updates, and that makes it really, really hard to implement SEO changes quickly. There can be URL structure problems. So a lot of systems, and again, for one of my clients, they use OpenBet, and it's a really, really helpful in the way that it will help find it was associate different betting IDs to different markets and different events and different races, and it will be able to hydrate the on-page content based on what event is coming up. And that's really, really helpful. But that also just means that it generates non-friendly, SEO-friendly URLs. So the URL string will typically see that betting ID associated. And that also means that with an event-based kind of business, like those pages will live and they will die consistently. So that just means that for a really, really prescient event that's coming up, we can really only keep those URLs in the index for maybe 7 days for a live betting event, but maybe we'll have to have a separate URL in the futures to be able to alert people this is happening. Let's have bets based on what we think will be the before nominated horses that will race. Let's have the all winner place, the after nominations, my horse is going to race. That's great. Now let's do this before the actual live betting event so we can be able to place bets. So, there's 3 types of ways that they can be able to place bets, but by the actual time the live betting URL is released, that will only live in the index for a couple of days, up to maybe 7 days. And if there's inefficiency with the JavaScript of that site, sometimes we'll actually find that those pages never make it to index because they've got crawl and render issues. So that can be at scale. It may be 5% of pages.
Sure.
But again, in $1 billion industry, that is a lot of money. That is a lot of money. And that's one of the things that we're trying to solve at the moment. But crawlability and indexation problems, old infrastructures can absolutely block search engine bots due to those poor internal linking structures or in the way that the pages will generate, or JavaScript-based navigation, like I said before, or have excessive use of iframes. So there are a lot that can really, really hinder this with legacy systems. But this is what I think a good technical SEO coming to a project never says impossible, just says maybe not now. Because there's always some creative ways that we can be able to look at this. There is APIs and that we can be able to use other search lookups to be able to use and piggyback off that logic. There's so many different ways that you can be able to solve a problem. So having an open mind and a lot of creativity with the technical foundation can be your best defense.
Yeah, I love it. So hearing you talk about these legacy systems reminds me of a project I worked on last year with a $500 million company, not $1 billion. But IT and marketing were completely separate organizations. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, they didn't like each other. So I was working for marketing, but any changes to the website had to be done through IT, and they didn't like any of the changes that were coming through. I'm sure you've experienced a little bit of this yourself because, big projects like this, they require cross-functional collaboration. How do you navigate internal politics, secure stakeholder buy-in for major SEO initiatives?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's actually, the $1 billion question of this podcast, because without being able to communicate what the problem is and really be able to make business case for solving them and allowing additional resources and time and team to be able to work on these problems, we can't really get anything done. So I think when it comes to different stakeholders, be very, very aware of your audience. In large organizations, SEO impacts multiple teams. It includes engineering, it includes product, marketing, legal, and of course, executives and C-suite. So I think mapping out who those decision makers are, having an idea of who your target audience is when you're presenting ideas and tailoring this to understand their priorities, understand their pain points. Maybe they'll have their own KPIs that they're wanting to speak to. And also, really, really importantly, identify who's the SEO champion in the room that can really be able to advocate for your initiatives when you're not present. That can be really, really helpful to be able to identify these people, empower them, give them all the tools that they need to be successful, to be able to help you, get things across. So I think language is exceptionally important and helpful to be able to reach that audience. So when you're talking to legal and compliance, you're talking about risk mitigation. You're talking about adherence to regulations. When you're talking to marketing and content teams, you're talking about audience growth, brand positioning, and content efficiency. When you're talking to developers, clear technical specifications, solutions with minimal disruption. So in my Jira tickets, I like to be exceptionally detailed, stating what the problem is, why it's an issue, where we've been able to see it, how to be able to replicate that, what we recommend the fix is, but again, allowing for a lot of creative license for the developer. And then an acceptance criteria, which is really, really helpful to actually say like, well, this is what we're looking for with this fix. And then of course to the executive.
Yeah.
To the executive audience, communicating by ROI, communicating by the revenue impact with market competitiveness, and really avoiding jargon heavy SEO explanations, instead trying to just frame those solutions in terms of efficiency, automation, and business growth. Because to build a strong case, sometimes what you say cannot be enough. I will look to other SEOs, and I have a wonderful base of friends, yourself included now. I hope that's okay. But showing before and after case studies or competitive comparisons can be an exceptionally helpful linchpin in conversations. I quite literally had a conversation on Monday and they said like, we really appreciate this, this round of technical discovery. We want to address the infinite scroll, but for us to be able to take that back to our internal team, do you have any case studies or competitive comparisons for us to be able to do this? Because it's not an issue that we're unaware of. We just didn't realize the extent of how bad this problem was. But given like their previous hesitation, can you give us some more ammunition to be able to help us? Like we believe you, we're on board with you. We just need some extra stuff to be able to really highlight this.
Yeah.
So I think that can be really, really helpful for those SEO advocates to just arm them with whatever they need to be able to advocate for this internally.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. Yeah, agreed. So Nick, as you're looking ahead, okay, over the next 5 years or so, we've got a lot of really interesting advancements in AI, automation. How do you see the role of a technical SEO evolving?
Oof. I see this evolving in a lot of different ways. Again, like I've sort of indicated, we don't just apply SEO, core foundations and best practice. We also look to use machine learning in our toolbox to be able to solve different problems and look at their tech stack and look at the different technology that they use to maybe look at using different logic from different systems to be able to solve problems and create custom solutions that, don't mean that they need to add any additional overhead to be able to solve problems. I think core technical foundations will still remain critical. I think ensuring a website is still easily crawlable, renderable, indexable will still stay fundamental, because I think that will never change. I've been an SEO for over 10 years. It makes me old when I say this, but I have seen the same problems across, working on 40 Winks, working on The Good Guys, working Petstock, working on Australia Post, working on Zendesk, all the same problems, just with different scale and with different teams, with different budgets and with different understanding and technical literacy, at their helms. So I still think that will remain critical as for any technical SEO or any SEO out there. Don't think in segments, think holistically. I think content quality and structure will become paramount. I think because a lot of the ability of our systems to be able to understand content, I think it's really important for us to make sure that data is accessible. And I say this with a broad view of, yes, I'm maybe talking about this from a rendering perspective, but in the way that if you have really good quality content and be objective with this, have someone else read this and, have a good view of whether your content makes sense and is answering the question and has a visual aid, has maybe even an audio aid, has video aid, have as many different types of media to be able to support your content. Because when it comes to the web and the way that search engines are evolving, they want to be the answer engine in the pocket that will give you the quick answer. And I think with having ChatGPT open up with a search engine, and we're seeing a lot more competitiveness with Bing, I think Google is going to have a very big shift in the way that it provides its user experience. And in that, we've seen multimodal search engine results really take the lead. We've seen search generative experience, SGE results, have AI overviews, be able to be in the above fold for a ton of different queries. Everyone's sort of doing different experiments and throwing out different percentages of how many queries, but a significant amount of queries for this to really be considerate. And when people ask us, how are you leveraging, for the LLM experience? One of the things that say to those folks is think about how accessible your content is to be able to be seen by these user agents and be extractable. And in what format are they extractable? Do you have content that is formatted with bullet points and has good Kincaid readability? Do you have tables that showcase data in a way that is accessible and readable? Do you have images? Do you have video? Do you have audio elements? Do you have, skip to links to be able to break up and segment your content in a way that makes it easy to be able to access and navigate around for that overall user experience? Is your content well cited? And maybe I'm dipping into WEAT, expertise, experience, authority, and trustworthiness. But all those things absolutely do matter. And I think the on-page experience will have a lot more significance with this when it comes to wanting to be more visible for the LLM, for large language models that is wanting to extract and maybe have your content in its pre-trained model so that it uses that to be able to inform its output to users. So I think that is really going to be changing in the way that we do things. And I think just in the way that we're trying to solve this, I think the challenge for us is to be able to take all of these things and be able to communicate them and work towards fixing those at scale in a way that's going to be competitive. Because even the large billion-dollar enterprise sites are still finding smaller satellite sites with a lot more agile teams and a fresher, more motivated team that is utilizing social media and other ways to be able to really, really help the engagement on their sites. They are winning for some of these smaller niches because they have more of that, more focus on these particular smaller types of niches. So they're able to cut the market share with this. And we've seen some really, really interesting brands come up and really challenge, some of these monoliths. I have seen it being done. I've worked with these brands to do this, to take on the David versus Goliath. And that's really, really cool. So I think monitoring, I think adapting to this, I think trying to be as agile as you can, even at scale, really is a key to making sure that you're not just relying on your trust and your authority to always consistently lift you up. Good SEO technicality and practice will still be your best defense for the future.
Love it. Last question, Nik. Can you take us behind the scenes of winning an SEO proposal for a billion-dollar brand? I mean, is this a year-long process? What exactly does that look like?
It really, really differs. For instance, I think from having a first conversation to winning a contract with a multi-billion-dollar client, the last one was probably maybe within a few weeks. And granted, I think I enjoy speaking and advocating for good practice and doing SEO, but this is something that I do because I wanted to be able to talk to some of the smartest people in the room and have a platform to be able to ask my questions and be able to find people that will teach me something new about the profession that I do and the profession that I love. So I started doing keynote speaking as a way to actually, really test my mettle, really consolidate what I know and what I've learned, to be able to take a lot of what I've done and what I've tested and just share these results. Because like I said, with wanting to have business case, a lot of these examples will lay down the foundations. They will have providence for others to be able to use those case studies to be able to get implementation done and across the line. So I think that's really, really essential. So what I'm trying to say is I find a lot of my audience through advocating for best practice and through a lot of my work that because it's interesting. And I think a lot of people will find the way that you approach problems and the way that you're able to solve things is interesting, and they want to see what you can be able to do with their systems. I think from going from like the initial conversation to a contract really does differ. But with that being said, everything that we've done, I think, always comes down to the core aspect of, well, let's like ask for a quote for, but I think that this is like our way of just trying to find like a good connection, a good basis, a good working relationship, and forging good trust. Because I think with a no stone unturned kind of approach, I think it's very, very helpful to be able to, for them to be able to see like, you know, what we're about. So yeah, it really, really differs. I mean, some, you know, that's not all the time. It doesn't generally, you know, happen over a few weeks. You know, some conversations will be over a longer period of time. Sometimes, I think it just really, really depends. Like we've been talking to a client for over a year, and they're not technically a client. They ask us questions here or there, but we always try and like help them and give some good advice. And like every now and then they'll throw a project our way, but they're never an ongoing, consistent client. Yeah. So it really, really differs. It really depends.
Yeah. Well, Nik, thank you so much again for your time, for being here today. Really appreciate it. For those who want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way to connect with me is through LinkedIn. You can just DM me. I will want to give you a bit of a caveat though. Sometimes I will take a day to get to your message, just because usually I am so heavily focused on working on tasks. Yeah. LinkedIn is the best way to be able to find me. I'm also on Twitter. You can be able to send me a DM via Twitter. Those two are generally the best ways you can be able to find me.
Amazing. Thanks so much.